Hello, you're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories. Donald Trump says tariffs are still in effect after the US appeals court ruling. At least 3 dead as Indonesian protesters set fire to regional parliament building. Leaders gather in China for the largest ever Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. US President Donald Trump has slammed a federal appeals court ruling that declares most of his tariffs illegal. Writing on Truth Social, Trump called the decision completely wrong and noted that all tariffs are still in effect, warning that removing them would be a total disaster for the country.
We're thinking in terms of 25%.
US President Donald Trump has strongly rejected a federal appeals court ruling that declared most of his global tariffs illegal. Writing on Truth Social, Trump called the decision completely wrong, stressing that all tariffs are still in effect. The president warned, "If these tariffs were ever removed, it would be a total disaster for our country." He made it clear that he is counting on the US Supreme Court to uphold his tariff policy. A divided US appeals court ruled on Friday that most of Donald Trump's global tariffs are illegal, undercutting the president's use of the levies as a key international economic policy tool. The court allowed the tariffs to remain in place through October 14th to give the Trump administration a chance to file an appeal with the US Supreme Court. So far, the Treasury Department, the US Trade Representative, and the Commerce Department have not issued an official response. The tariffs at the heart of this legal battle come from President Trump's sweeping Liberation Day package announced in April. They include a 10% duty on nearly all imports, new reciprocal rates on US trading partners, and higher levies on steel, aluminum, and autos. As a result, America's average tariff rate now stands near 18%, the highest in almost a century.
At least one person was killed in an overnight Russian attack on Ukraine's southeastern Zaporizhzhia region, officials said on Saturday. Zaporizhzhia Regional Military Administration reported that at least 22 people were injured as rescue teams worked at the scene. Explosions were heard late Friday, hitting residential and retail areas. The administration added Russia has denied targeting civilians since its full-scale invasion began in February 2022, but maintains that energy facilities and other infrastructure are legitimate military targets because they support Ukraine's war effort. Meanwhile, EU defence ministers on Friday emphasised stronger backing for Ukraine, including plans to expand the bloc's military training mission and boost its defence industry. At the same time, Kyiv called an emergency UN Security Council session following deadly Russian strikes on the capital.
European Union defence ministers signalled strong support on Friday for expanding the bloc's military training mission to operate inside Ukraine if a truce is reached. The move underscores a push to bolster Kyiv's security and strengthen its defence industry amid escalating Russian attacks. Meeting in Copenhagen, EU foreign policy chief said ministers agreed that only pressure works on Moscow following a wave of Russian missile and drone strikes that killed 23 people in Kyiv and damaged a European diplomatic mission.
Well, again, Russia does not want peace. That is very clear right now. Also, the attacks that they are doing. So we have to put the pressure on them so that they would also want peace. And this is the only thing that works on that.
Danish defence minister, who chaired the meeting, said support for Ukraine's defence industry was the highest priority.
My clear expectation of what will take up the most time here today, and it is also the most crucial question for Denmark, that is the question of future support for Ukraine. The whole question of how we can support the Ukrainian defence industry to a greater extent and thus strengthen the combat power in Ukraine. That will have the highest priority here today.
Ministers from Lithuania and Estonia reiterated that Moscow could not be trusted and emphasised that Ukraine's eventual NATO membership remained its strongest security guarantee. European Union adopted its 18th sanctions package against Russia last month, tightening measures on Moscow's war economy, closing loopholes and extending penalties to Belarus. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen hailed the measures as a clear signal that Europe's resolve will not waver and urged member states to accelerate military aid.
We will come forward soon with our 19th package of hard-biting sanctions. And in parallel, we are advancing the work on the Russian frozen assets to contribute to Ukraine's defense and reconstruction.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has called an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council, appealing for international backing after the latest attacks on Kyiv and other cities. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said the strikes demonstrated Russian terror and urged tougher sanctions to force Moscow into genuine peace negotiations.
Kyiv is in mourning after a massive strike that killed dozens, including children. The attack has left the city shaken by widespread damage as communities endure loss and grief.
Kyiv is mourning the victims of a massive Russian strike that hit the city Thursday night. At least 23 people were killed and dozens more injured. Among the dead were 4 children, including a child as young as 2, according to Ukrainian authorities. The city is filled with shock and grief. Residents are finding the only way they can to show their sorrow, laying flowers and toys at makeshift memorials for the young lives lost. Buildings were damaged, leaving entire neighborhoods scattered and in ruins. For locals, the loss of children doubles the tragedy as families face both grief and the destruction of their homes. Many are packing their belongings, moving away while firefighters and rescue teams sift through the rubble, trying to salvage what's left.
The war must stop. Of course, Ukraine wants to stop the war. We are all sick of it. How long must it go on? How much more suffering? So much destruction across all Ukraine, so many dead, so many killed children. There are no words to express this pain. I do not know what else one can say.
Other residents echoed the sentiment.
I do not even know what to say, honestly. I work at a local market. We know all the local people. They used to shop with us. I have no words. All those children, we watched them as they grew in front of our eyes. It is so difficult, really tough. I have no words to describe it.
According to Ukrainian officials, Russia launched nearly 600 drones and more than 30 ballistic and cruise missiles, the most intense assault on Kyiv this month. Many of the victims were killed when a 5-story residential building collapsed in the Darnitsky district on the city's left bank. Alongside the EU mission, the Azerbaijani embassy in Kyiv was also damaged in the blasts. Windows were shattered and the consular roof cracked. But Azerbaijan's foreign ministry confirmed there were no injuries among staff, and the embassy remains operational.
President Zelensky says talks on security guarantees for the country must urgently move to the level of world leaders. The Ukrainian president said he expected to continue talks with European leaders next week on NATO-like commitments to protect Ukraine, adding that US president should also be involved. Ukraine is pressing for NATO-style assurances as part of any eventual peace deal with Russia. Zelensky stressed the need for legally binding guarantees, saying Ukraine doesn't want a repeat of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum when it gave up its nuclear arsenal in return for security assurances. The UK, France and Germany have launched the process to reimpose sanctions on Iran over allegations that it is not fulfilling its obligations under the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. In recent hours, representatives of those countries spoke to the press ahead of a closed UN Security Council meeting. Mitch McCann reports from the UN.
Here at the United Nations on Friday, representatives from the UK, France and Germany outlined why they believe it's important to reimpose sanctions on Iran using what is known as the snapback mechanism. The Iran nuclear deal is formally known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and was established in 2015 between Iran, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, as well as Germany. British Ambassador to the UN, Barbara Woodward, told members of the press on Friday, "We believe Iran to be in significant non-performance of its commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action." She added that since 2019, Iran has increasingly and deliberately ceased performing all of its JCPOA commitments. The agreement's snapback mechanism, which the UK, France and Germany are invoking, means since they believe Iran is not living up to its end of the agreement, they can choose to reimpose sanctions after a consultation period between those European countries and Iran. Barbara Woodward says Iran has stockpiled highly enriched uranium, something she said lacks any credible civilian justification. In June, the United States bombed 3 nuclear facilities in Iran over its own concerns, but reports suggest they were not all completely destroyed, as President Donald Trump had claimed. Iran has called the decision illegal and says it will respond appropriately to what it calls an unjustified action by the 3 European countries. Mitch McCann for AnewZ at the United Nations in New York.
At least 3 people have died and 5 others were injured after protesters in Indonesia set fire to a regional parliament building. The protests began earlier this week in the capital Jakarta over lawmakers' pay and escalated on Friday after a police armoured vehicle struck and killed a ride-hailing motorbike driver. Authorities have not disclosed the cause of death for the 3 victims, but local media reported they were allegedly trapped inside the burning building. World leaders have begun arriving in Beijing ahead of the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. The 2-day gathering is expecting leaders from more than 20 countries.
Tianjin, we are coming!
The 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit is set to begin as preparations have been fully completed. The summit, scheduled for August 31st to September 1st in the northern Chinese port city of Tianjin, is seen as a pivotal moment, with hopes it will usher in a new phase of high-quality development marked by stronger unity, deeper cooperation and increased vitality. Leaders from more than 20 countries, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, are expected to attend. Heads of 10 international organizations will also be present. Officials say the gathering is expected to be the largest in the organization's history, with upgrades made to the main venue.
From bilateral meetings and arrivals at transport hubs to hotel reception, the news centre and city transportation, we have worked meticulously on atmosphere creation and venue arrangements. We are confident that with the concerted efforts of the entire city, the summit will be a success that embodies the Shanghai spirit, showcases China's style, and highlights Tianjin's unique character.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has arrived in Beijing ahead of the summit. The UN chief has visited China multiple times. Last year, he came as a special guest to attend the Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Political leaders have expressed appreciation for the summit and the opportunities it provides for multilateral cooperation.
It is very important for us to be, as you said, in this family. More than 20 heads of state will be present at the SCO summit. I will tell you, being leading states in the world and to be in this family is not just honorable. This is, of course, nice. It inspires many people, including Belarusians, that their president is in this respectable family. Let's speak frankly, this largely determines today's development.
The SCO continues to gain vitality as more and more extensive issues are included onto its agenda, which is of vital significance to the multilateral cooperation mechanism. China promoted cooperation among all countries when serving as the rotating chair. Kyrgyzstan will take over the rotating chair and continue to promote the implementation of all topics.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization was established in 2001 with a focus on security in Central Asia and the wider region. It has since expanded to 10 nations. Its membership accounts for an estimated 42% of the world's population and around a quarter of global GDP.
China is also gearing up for a massive display of military power and diplomacy as it finalises preparations for next week's Victory Day parade. It marks 80 years since the end of World War II. Our Mahnoud Maktoum has more from Beijing.
China is entering the final stages of preparations for the upcoming military parade scheduled for September 3rd in Beijing to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The parade will be held in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. The capital has undergone heightened security measures with central avenues along the Chang'an Boulevard cordoned off for military envoys and rehearsals. Large-scale troop mobilization and precision drills are also being staged by People's Liberation Army to ensure flawless execution. Authorities have also coordinated crowd control and transport restrictions. On the diplomatic front, China has confirmed the attendance of several foreign leaders. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will participate in the Victory Day parade in Beijing next week, said China's Foreign Ministry on Thursday. Kim and Putin are also expected to take center stage with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Invitations have also been extended to friendly nations across Asia and beyond, with representatives from Iran, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia expected to be in attendance. The upcoming parade is being framed by Beijing as a remembrance of wartime sacrifice as well as a showcase for China's latest military technology. Manu Maktoum, AnewZ, Beijing.
The World Health Organization is sounding the alarm on Afghanistan's growing humanitarian and health crisis. It warns that millions of returning refugees will strain the country's fragile system and has urged the international community to provide more funding to meet urgent needs. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
According to a new report by the World Health Organization, about 1.6 million Afghans are expected to return from Pakistan and nearly 2 million from Iran this year. The mass return of refugees is expected to put even more pressure on Afghanistan's already fragile health system. The WHO says 22.9 million people in Afghanistan, nearly half of the country's population, will need humanitarian assistance in 2025. But aid agencies have only planned support for 16.8 million people, leaving a major gap that would require $2.4 billion in funding. The report warns that Afghanistan's health system is especially vulnerable in rural and remote areas where many communities still lack access to even basic medical services. The WHO also cautions about the risk of disease outbreaks this year, naming polio, malaria, COVID-19, diarrhea, and other major infectious diseases as ongoing threats. With millions returning home and international aid falling short, the WHO says urgent global support is critical to prevent further suffering. For now, Afghanistan remains on the edge of a deepening health emergency. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for AnewZ.
Tajikistan has officially joined the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation in Central Asia. The document was signed in Dushanbe by President Emomali Rahmon during his meeting with Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Murat Nurtlev. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has this report.
Central Asia is taking another step towards stronger regional unity. In Dushanbe, President Emomali Rahmon of Tajikistan has signed the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation following talks with Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Murat Nurtlev. With this move, Tajikistan has formally joined the regional initiative aimed at building stability, trust and long-term partnership among neighboring states. The treaty was first signed in July 2022 in Cholponata by the presidents of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. At the time, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan held back, saying they needed to complete domestic procedures. Now that Dushanbe has added its signature, only Turkmenistan remains outside the agreement. The document lays out key principles: respect for borders, non-interference in internal affairs, and a commitment to reject the use of force. The signatures pledge not to join military alliances or blocs directed against each other, and not to allow third countries to use their territories in ways that could undermine the security of their neighbors. Any disputes that arise are to be settled only through peaceful diplomacy. Beyond security, the treaty also highlights cooperation in other areas. It calls for joint action on natural disasters, support for environmental challenges such as the Aral Sea, and the creation of better conditions for businesses. Importantly, it also contains mutual security guarantees. If the independence, sovereignty, or territorial integrity of any signatory comes under threat, the others are obliged to provide support. Officials stress that the agreement is not just a declaration of goodwill. It's intended to give real momentum to closer ties across Central Asia at a time when the region faces mounting external pressures and complex security risks. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ.
Pakistan and Armenia have agreed to consider establishing diplomatic relations. The development was announced by Pakistan's Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar in a social media post. He said the decision followed a phone call with his Armenian counterpart Ararat Mirzoyan. The two sides have not previously had formal relations, and the talks mark a possible opening between Islamabad and Yerevan. Pakistan has long withheld recognition of Armenia, a stance rooted in its support for Azerbaijan during the conflict over Karabakh. The prevailing assumption has been that Islamabad would only revisit this position once Armenia's occupation ended and peace was reached between Baku and Yerevan. Now, 3 weeks after the 8th August breakthrough in Washington, which saw the initialing of a peace treaty and progress on the connectivity agreement via the so-called TRIP or Zangezur corridor, Islamabad and Yerevan are said to have agreed to consider the establishment of diplomatic relations. Joining us now to reflect on the implications of this development is Hamza Azhar Salam, editor at the Pakistan Daily. Hamza, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, is this the right moment for Pakistan and Armenia to agree on considering the process of establishing diplomatic ties, or is this a step too soon?
After the peace agreement was signed in Washington, I think this is an appropriate time for both foreign ministers to at least discuss and consider the possibility. I think the wordings of the Pakistani foreign minister are very important. He said that Pakistan and Armenia are just doing of build diplomatic tie. There has not been any formal of diplomatic between both countries. There has not been any announcement, or there is no plan for immediate embassy of Armenia in Pakistan or any embassy in Armenia. So we are still in the initial stages, but after the peace agreement, I think with speaking with the Azerbaijani friends, I think eventually it is possible that Pakistan and Armenia will establish diplomatic relations.
Okay, and do you expect the actual establishment of diplomatic relations to be contingent on the formal signing and ratification of the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace treaty?
Yes, Pakistan will closely consider how the situation evolves, and whatever Pakistan will be done with the full confidence of the Azerbaijani leadership. Azerbaijan is a core partner for Pakistan, and Azerbaijan's interests are paramount in Pakistan's foreign policy. So yes, I think Islamabad will observe how the situation evolves, how Armenia behaves after this peace treaty, and whether there are appropriate changes in the constitution and other things which can ensure lasting peace. So it still remains to be seen when it will be done, but if things move forward in the right direction, then I think diplomatic relations may be established.
Okay, and lastly, Hamza, could the prospect of Islamabad normalizing ties with Yerevan carry wider geopolitical implications, particularly in light of Pakistan's long-standing rivalry with India?
Well, yes, because Pakistan and Armenia did not have diplomatic relations, there was some strategic space left in the South Caucasus and in the region because of New Delhi. Now, Pakistan has already placed its bet on Azerbaijan as a strategic partner in the region. So, although the dynamic with India does, the new proposed relations between Islamabad and Yerevan, I think Islamabad is still very comfortable working closely with Baku, and this is how the situation remains because Islamabad and Yerevan established diplomatic relations. The relationship between Islamabad and Baku will not be impacted. In fact, it could be stronger as Pakistan could play the role of a bridge. Pakistan will always consider Azerbaijan's interests in the region, and it would expect the same from the Azerbaijani side. So I do think that while the Indian dynamic will have an impact, ultimately Pakistan is very happy and secure with its relationship with Azerbaijan.
Okay, Hamza, thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
The text of a memorandum of understanding signed between Azerbaijan and the US on the 8th of August in Washington was published. The document outlines the creation of a strategic working group tasked with drafting a strategic partnership charter within 6 months. Under the memorandum, both countries agreed to focus cooperation on energy investments and regional connectivity, defence and counter-terrorism, regional economic and trade ties, and artificial intelligence and digital infrastructure projects. The memorandum will remain in effect for 1 year, with the possibility of extension by mutual agreement. And that's your news update for now from Baku. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates.